We've heard the news from the BBC.
Now it's your turn.
Yo, you can join the conversation anywhere you want it. On the blog, on Twitter, Facebook, or worldhaveyourSay.com.
Welcome to World Have Your Say.
Hello, I'm Krupa Padi. Thanks for joining us. Friends of Syria have gathered in Paris with one key message. President Assad must go. They're meeting to find a way out of the crisis. Over 100 countries are there, minus Russia and China, who've chosen to sit out. Hashtag Syria is busy on Twitter as you share your views on what many are terming yet another meeting on the violence. Syria Sunny Boy tweets, "How can we have all those friends whilst the killing continues?" France's foreign minister responds, "These aren't abstract talks, we're talking practical support for the people of Syria." It's most read on Al Jazeera, BBC and CNN. Get involved in the conversation. Tweet us or Skype us at BBC_WHYS. How would you end the crisis in Syria?
I'm Ayona One from South Sudan, and this is BBC World of USA. To take part in this live debate, call country code 442031624242.
Well, we've been asking for your solutions and comments on the crisis on Facebook and Twitter, and we've got a guest to talk about these suggestions that you've been sending through. Haysam Al-Sibahi is a member of the Syrian Social Club in London. He joins us from our Westminster studios. Dmitry Babich is a political analyst for The Voice of Russia. He joins us from our Moscow studios. Georges Malbruno is a journalist for Le Figaro in France. And Yavuz Baydar is a columnist at Today's Zaman in Turkey. Thank you to all of you for joining us. Let's first go to George. You're at the conference. Bring us up to speed with what's going on there.
There were very emotional speeches this morning made at this conference, mainly by the people from inside Syria who left the country recently. And the priority at this conference was given this time, contrary to the previous in Tunis or in Istanbul, to the voices of inside Syria and not necessarily to the leaders of the opposition in exile, which has been unable to bring help to the people inside. So we heard very emotional speech from Riyad Saif, a Syrian guy who recently left Syria, and others, mainly with one request: please help us with weapons, with humanitarian help, and not necessarily with all these talks which have been done in the past. So clearly there is a feeling of an emergency feeling. Hillary Clinton also was very tough against Russia, and China is supporting Bashar al-Assad, but also was tough against the opposition abroad, unable to unify themselves. So, and there was also Laurent Fabius, the French foreign minister, who announced officially the defection of Manaf Tlas. Manaf Tlas is the general friend of Bashar al-Assad at the Republican Guard. He is apparently on his way to Paris.
Thank you for that. I mean, you've brought up the issue of talks of the past, and that's something that's been coming up a lot amongst our listeners. Let me read you a few of the tweets that have been sent through. Carl Sharrow in London says, "We need to act fast to stop this epidemic of international conferences, talking about it every single week." Yasmin in Syria tweets, "Does anyone find these Friends of Syria meetings a joke at this point? That this is far in and everyone just talks. It's ridiculous." To all of you, and feel free to pick up on this, the Paris meeting follows similar events in Tunis and Istanbul. This is yet another conference. Can these talks make any difference? Yavuz, maybe you want to pick up.
Well, there's progress. Each time they meet, I think they, particularly the US and some prominent EU powers and Turkey, all these three, axis blocks, if you will, they make emphasis on how how inevitable the fate of Assad regime is, and as they meet more and more, I think the internal dynamics of Syria is also progressing. At the moment, according to a very Syrian source, a former MP that I met last week, now the regime, Ba'athist regime, lost control of it's approximately 60% of the territory. And my source told me if that goes up to 70, 75, that's the critical point of a very serious turning point for, to mark beginning of the end. But also this meeting was marked by a very important defection of Manaf Tlas, a top general, Sunnite general, who was very close to Hafez, the father, and also to Bashar. And this defection of a Sunnite top general, possibly with loads of information, I think will mark another turning point. As Martin Indyk, formerly President Clinton's Assistant Secretary of State, he was responsible of Near East affairs, etc.
So you clearly feel that progress is being made each time. Hi, Sam. Yavuz clearly thinks progress is being made. What do you feel?
No, I don't think so. I mean, this conference is taking the Syrian crisis from one failure to another. We've seen the conference last week in Cairo where the opposition hasn't left for us, who they are the pro, any names to call them. They call each other traitors, they call each other, money grabbers, they call each other all sorts of names. And now they're going to France again to beg for help. To beg for help on what? To bomb Syria, to create more destruction in Syria. They want the Syrian government to hand the keys to them. The Syrian government is not going to hand the keys to them. Anyone want the keys, he has to come and take it. If there is an opposition group, they have to go to Syria, sit for a dialogue, form parties, go through the political process, go through the ballot box, and win. If they have any support on the ground, they could win. They could win and be in the government positions, and they could act on it. To ask NATO, to ask the United States for help, I mean, it was all this. It's not going to change anything. This opposition has no alternative. They haven't showed us, till now, any program for Syria, any alternative for Syria. All what they're asking is a whole government in Syria to collapse, a whole the institutions in Syria to collapse, things to go to chaos, so they could gain and get the keys and be warlords afterwards. Exactly what's happening in Iraq is exactly what's happening in Libya. This is not going to happen. There is a government in Syria. The international community should deal with this government according to the international law, as the Russians said. I mean, I heard today the Qatari foreign minister saying we could do something else. Why they want to break the international law? I mean, this group, they want to break international law. There is a Security Council. There is a United Nations. The Security Council has appointed Mr. Annan to carry out this. The first paragraph, Mr. Annan, the killing has to stop. Those terrorists who they open borders for them from Turkey and Lebanon, they have to go back, and this country has to control its own borders, has to stop the arms pouring to Syria, and they have to think about dialogue and sit on the table.
Hassan, we've heard that. Let's get Dimitri in here.
Yeah. I agree with most of what the last speaker said, but I would like also to comment a little bit on the format of these so-called Friends of Syria meetings. When you have so many countries, like 100 of them, most of them not having anything to do with Syria, when you have such a meeting, it inevitably becomes a propaganda event, because for a serious meeting, you must have the actors really involved in Syria, and some real plan of action. That's why Russia did not participate in this meeting in France. We participated in the meeting in Geneva because there the real actors were involved, all the members of the UN Security Council. Unfortunately, Saudi Arabia and Iran were not invited. I don't think it was a good idea, because basically, even if someone doesn't like these countries, they are involved in Syria, so a real peace settlement requires, I think, their participation.
Dimitri, let me get your reaction to what Hillary Clinton actually said about Russia. She said that every nation must make it clear that Russia and China will pay a price. They're holding up progress.
Why United States doesn't pay the price? The United States did a lot of atrocities in the Middle East. Excuse me, there is 1.2 million people died in Iraq. There is over 100,000. Did we see any of United States officials
let's get that reaction from
in the
Dimitri
ICC?
first.
No.
I agree with what the last speaker said, but I would like to say that maybe before saying that someone should pay a price, you should try to understand that side's position. Basically, it looks like that the events in Syria took a turn that the West did not anticipate. The West obviously thought that Assad's government would collapse quickly. It didn't collapse. So right now, the West is so frustrated. By the West, I mean United States and the European Union. And in order to save face, they blame everything on Russia and China, as if Russia and China were the only supports, were the only props for the Assad regime. I think the real problem is the amount of violence in Syria. And here I basically would like to continue what our colleague from Turkey said. I think when we say that the situation is progressing, I don't think most of the Syrians would agree, because when you see people dying everywhere, they are dying both from the government troops and they are dying from explosions that happen in Damascus, in Aleppo, in other cities. I don't think this is progress. I don't think the majority of Syrians want it.
Well,
and I would like to add that, just the last word.
Sure.
The representatives of Syrian National Council are going to come to Russia in the coming days. Already several opposition groups visited Russia, and I would like to say that Syrian opposition is not united against Russia. Michel Kilo, who is a very prominent opposition member, and a lot of other people, they say that Russia should play a role in the Syrian settlement.
Well, we've had a call from the US, and both Dimitri, you and Hassam have mentioned the US in this. James has got in touch from LA. He got in touch by giving us a call on our number, which is country code 44 20 31 62 42 42. You too can give us a call and we'll try our best to get you on air. James, thanks for getting in touch. What would you like to add to the conversation?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the BBC. I very much respect what you have to say internationally here. You can actually Google James Morris and Russia Today, and you can see an appearance that I had on the Russia Today crosstalk program. I'm British as well as American. And what we're facing in Syria, it's been pushed for by the Israel lobby. You've got the National Endowment for Democracy, and you have the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, and they've been, pushing for what's been happening with the rebel groups there, of course, with the support of Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Turkey. And the best way to cease the violence in Syria is to stop that. And you're not going to have that stop because, like I said, you've got the neoconservatives that are part of that upper echelon of the Israel lobby. You've got AIPAC. You've got the AIPAC spin-off think tank in Washington, the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. I just saw on C-SPAN's Washington Journal here in the U.S., David Pollack, who's with the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, he's saying he's Skyping with the Syrian rebels on a daily basis. So this has Israel's footprint, fingerprints all over it, and it's basically the rest of the neocon clean break agenda that the Iraq War was based on.
Thank you for your comment, James. Thanks for getting in touch. We've got another guest joining us. Susan is an Egyptian studying international development in Dubai. Thanks for joining us, Susan. Let me put a few points to you. We've had several of our Facebook contributors getting in touch with their suggestions on how to solve the crisis in Syria. Let me read you one of them. Habra is in Sudan. He says the best solution is the formation of an all-inclusive government where the opposition and Mr. Assad can work together for the sake of the country.
I would add that in Geneva
Can I just get a reaction from Susan first, though?
Yes.
Susan, go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's a brilliant idea and everything. It's more of a utopian idea. But the thing is, the thing we're facing right now is opposition and also the government. They're both armed and they're both just fighting and killing blindly. So you really can't have a government formed and everything, then everything will turn out to be fine. A military intervention is preferred to intervene first so that you will ensure that there's stability that will take place, and then you can actually form a government, or the Kofi Annan's unity of government that he was claiming. And the thing is, it's a beautiful idea, to have both of the governments, but I believe that the Assad regime actually lost its legitimacy to actually be involved in any of the future plans of Syria.
If I can just jump on Susan just said, I would add that at the Geneva conference, it was agreed that Syria needs a coalition government. to get out of the crisis. The problem is that United States and other Western countries and Russia and China have slightly different perspectives. Obviously, the United States and the EU want Mr. Assad to leave first, and then to have this coalition government.
I understand, because I totally understand what the US was coming from, because right now the Assad regime, like if you see 15,800 people died in more than a year in the violence of Syria. And like if Mr. Assad was actually a good president or would actually be considered to be involved in the next government, I don't think so, because he did not show his power. He did not show his responsibility.
Let me say something here. When you say 15,800 died in Syria, you should mention is over 8,500 of those are army and security service and civilians who are pro-government, who they've been slaughtered in their homes, who've been kicked out of their homes. Nobody goes and points guns at a person who wearing the army uniform in the country. Well, I mean, this is our army. This is the Syrian army. When a terrorist come from outside and shoot at this army, this is insult to Syria and its sovereignty. You know, more than when 6,000 army personnel die in Syria.
Discuss these figures. I think this is Yavuz here. I think this is sort of useless discussion on this dimension because it's too late. If opposition was had very high expectations up until August last year, it was the expectations were tied to Bashar, who seemed to be a young figure who could transform the country, and opposition's expectations for a dialogue basically faded as the massacre started. So it's now too late. Too much blood has been spilled. It doesn't matter who from each side. So just let me conclude. So this is now, after almost a year, when the massacres started and intensified, it's irreversible. The question is not when, but the question is not if, but it's when. And it's going to be a very nasty, very long war, proxy war. And I think Clinton was implying to, the Russians and Chinese must see that this war will kill many people and destabilize the entire region. I think they are not both powers. Clinton could have formulated in this way. Both powers have nothing to gain by blocking any progress. Opposition cannot sit with a murderer anymore in a coalition.
Yeah, let me just bring to you the latest. Let me just bring to you the latest stuff that we are getting through on the wires, that there has been a powerful explosion that has targeted the political security office in Damascus. And obviously, the violence intense and continuing there in the capital as well.
Thank you very much. This is the type of the terror we are facing at the moment. These people, they go to government institutions and they blow up people. This is why every Syrian, or most of the Syrians, ask their government security and stability on the ground first, before political process. We are not going to go for dialogue for anymore. Our army and the security service and the government has to get stability and security on the ground first. We're talking about people being killed in this war, but there is a millions of people who lost their businesses, who lost their livelihood, who lost everything because of sanctions being appointed in Syria. It's not fair sanctions. Every pack of sanctions, they smile when they say it. They are at the moment affecting the Syrian people. If they really care about the Syrian people and they're talking about all this, we want the Syrian people to have a future, the sanctions, what they're doing exactly the opposite as it did in Iraq.
And we can really hear that passion in your voice as well. Hi, Sam. Thank you for your points. Just a reminder, you're listening to World Have You Say. We're talking about the Friends of Syria meeting that's currently taking place in Paris. Their leaders are there trying to find a solution to the ongoing violence. And we've invited guests on to discuss various strategies for peace in the region. We've got about 5 minutes left of the show. You two, of course, can still join in the conversation conversation. Skype or tweet us at BBC_WHYS or go to facebook.com/World Have Your Say to leave your point there. Let me put to you all another point that constantly comes up in various conversations, has done since day one. Charles in Ghana Facebooked us and said there must be military intervention to save the lives of innocent children. Have we now got to the point where we need to have some degree of military intervention? Maybe Susan, you want to pick up?
Yes, I believe that the military intervention like NATO or from the United Nations, they should intervene right now, because it's the opposition, really, they're just fighting, and the Syrian army, they're just fighting against. No one has a real goal. No one is really fighting for the stability of the country. I guess when foreign military intervention that will come in, at least it has a specific goal, which is just to ensure stability and security for the people. And plus, but the NATO, when they intervene or something, I hope that the countries that are intervening will not look for their interests, but will look for the Syrian people's interests. That's what I was hoping for. But it's definitely needed a military intervention right now, because they need to ensure stability not only for the Syrian people who are living in Syria, but also people who are living abroad and hold the Syrian nationality. They're scared now to actually go back to the country. If they lose their job or something, we're just going to increase the number of refugees.
We already had a military intervention in neighboring Iraq, and when people say that instability can somehow spill over from Syria to Lebanon, look, I think Georges Malbrunot wrote about in Le Figaro, some of the insurgents fighting in Syria actually came from Iraq, and they brought with them the techniques of car bomb explosions that are now rocking Damascus. So what happens is that the West is fighting for stability every year in a new country. In Iraq, they fought against instability in Kuwait. Now they are going to fight in Syria against instability that came from Iraq. Next year, they will fight in Lebanon against instability that comes from Syria. The question is that foreign interventions do not bring stability. We saw the civil war in Iraq, so I respectfully disagree with Susan that foreign troops will bring peace to Syria.
But what if the Assad regime and opposition are actually not reaching anything?
Well, the conversation is, of course, continuing there as well. We've just heard that the Friends of Syria group have called for more broader and tougher sanctions against Syria and Assad government officials. And they've also decided to massively increase aid to the opposition. That's the latest lines coming out from our Associated Press wires here. The conversation continues at BBC_WHYS on Twitter and Facebook.com/World Have Your Say. Ben James is back with you this evening on World Have Your Say at 1700 GMT, and we're live on BBC World TV at 1500 GMT. We're discussing the Higgs boson discovery. To all of our guests, a big thank you for joining us. We'll keep you posted on the conference on our website, bbc.com/news.
Sri Lanka to ABC.